Let me tell you something about myself first. If you look for someone who can prove to you that if you do something out of love, you probably will be good at it, then it will be me. I am not a professional, so when people talk about the war on professionals, I'm happy because I'm not one. I started my career as a pharmacist. I studied pharmaceutical sciences from Cairo University, and at the time I was doodling a lot, and I convinced myself that I'm a cartoonist, and I managed to convince some other people that I do cartoons and illustrations. I published my cartoons first in Finland. Second biggest daily was Aamulehti in Tampere. And later on, I traveled to Germany and then to the UK, where I did different things, working as a freelance reporter and cartoonist, doing illustrations, exhibitions, having fun with friends, and working in a daily pan-Arab publication in London called Sawt al-Kuwait at the time, and freelancing with Al-Ahram International, Rose Al-Yusuf magazine, and working with a couple of newspapers in Germany, Die Tageszeitung, and others, Berliner's Volksblatt and things like that. In 1994, I worked with the BBC Arabic television, the first take, the one that was closed down in 1996. And then I joined Al Jazeera International, which was Al Jazeera only at the time. I didn't last long there. I stayed for a few months and then came back to the BBC, but as a radio broadcaster. And I turned something that I was very passionate about. I started writing about the internet back in 1993. It was a weekly column, or actually a weekly centerfold, in a magazine that was part of a Sharq al-Awsat group called a Sharq al-Awsat magazine. And my first piece on the internet was in September 1993 in Al-Ahram International, 1 month before Ritzig starts having some kind of an internet connectivity at the time. 97, I turned that passion about the new world that we are sort of witnessing now into a radio program that was called Electronic Coffee Tales, حكايات المقهى الإلكتروني. And it started 1997, coined after a column that I used to have in that newspaper. Then I did some studies in the London School of Economics. I had a master's degree in analysis, design, and management of information systems from there. And in 1999, I was appointed head of bbcarabic.com and launched the first international news website in Arabic in the region, and that was the first non-English language website for the BBC. And then later on in 2004, I became the first Arab to head the BBC Arabic department since 1938. And I started my journey with multi-platform integration and playing with user content till I left in 2010. And then I joined Yahoo International after they acquired Maktub to launch the Arabic and English websites and establish the first video production units for Yahoo outside the US, and starting comedy platforms and entertainment platforms, and the only international serious website that offers entertainment for free, more than 600 movies and thousands of hours of entertainment, and original production, again on stand-up comedy, lifestyle, and various other things. هحاسبك بعدين. I have a story to tell, and I don't know if it's very relevant, or actually I know, but I'm pretending not to know. When I was in Finland the first time, does anyone speak Finnish here? Finnish. Good. So I can say whatever I like. It's a very interesting language, a difficult one. And in my first few days, I was trying to learn the language as much as I can and as quickly as I can. So the word that I started with was Tuovoimatoimisto. It sounds Japanese, but it's Finnish, says he. And Tuovoimatoimisto is the labor office or manpower office, if you translate it literally. And that's the one that I was looking for when I arrived, so that I can hand over my papers that I got from the embassy that I'm going to be working with pharmaceutical analytical laboratory, by the way. I didn't go there as a cartoonist. And at the time, there were very few foreigners in Finland. you know, and I wasn't in Helsinki, I was in Tampere, the second biggest city, and my appearance was a phenomenon, you know, somebody who apparently is not very white and, you know, dark, you know, I had more hair then, and I used to see, you know, girls would come and ask me to touch it because they don't think it's real, and I say, no, it's real, you can touch it. So I was walking one day, and, you know, in one of the sort of outskirts of Tampere, and then on a corner, I was just turning around, and then, you know, a little boy, 10 years old, running with his bike, and then he saw me, and he freaked out. He stopped. And the first thing that he came to his mind is, "Turpaki saatana perkele." And that was a problem. These are 3 words in Finnish, and they are very abusive words, which, of course, were the first words that I learned after Tuovoimat toimisto. Turpaki is an abbreviation of turpakini, which means shut up. Satana is Satan. Perkele is devil. So it's a combination. It's turpaki satana perkele. It took me some time to learn how to pronounce this. And my biggest problem is that, you know, I ran out of words. That's my vocabulary in 1 second. You know, I can't say anything to this boy. I don't know what to say. I cannot repeat the same thing because it becomes repetitive and redundant. So I said the first thing that came to my mind, which was mustikapiraka. And I said in the harshest way. Now, mustikapiraka was the word number 5 that I learned in Finnish. And it actually means blueberry pie. Because I visited a bakery in the morning, and, you know, I had something that was nice. I didn't know what blueberry is, and I tried to translate it into Arabic, and I couldn't. So I decided to, you know, sort of memorize the word as it is, and I, you know, learned it by heart. And I just, as soon as I said, you know, mustikapiraka, the boy freaked out and ran away again, and I was very pleased with myself. Now, why do I remember this? Because if anyone tells you that content is about what you actually convey and transmit, he will be lying to you. Because it's very important to understand that we are not in the business of content creation. We never, and we have never created content. We are in the business of content capturing and content formatting. And it's very important to understand that when you work in this profession, the biggest effort should go into formatting what you present. Because pure content can be put in books, you can publish it in periodicals, but the platform that you work on is key to the kind of experience that you would like to convey and the impact that you would like to have. And the content of what I said was blueberry pie, but that little boy freaked out because actually I didn't say blueberry pie. I probably said something else. Throughout my gestures, my expressions, you know, the harsh voice that I used, it probably meant for him something else, something aggressive, regardless of the meaning. So if you say it in a different context, you know, in a bakery, they will give you a nice little cake. That wasn't the case. He didn't give me a cake because he understood what I meant, not what I said. Which takes us nicely to somewhere. No, let me. Yeah, I think because it's not on the program itself. No, let's just. Okay. Which takes us to the guru, Marshall McLuhan. This is the man who confused the whole world when he said the medium is the message. And confused me when he said that the world is a global village, because what really irritated me is that everybody kept on saying this without understanding what it means. You know, every single sort of column about information technology, communication for decades would start with the phrase, you know, the world is a global village, you know, because of communication. So he offered people, you know, a couple of metaphors and a number of concepts that were very interesting. But if you think of what I said now and what Marshall McLuhan said when he said the medium is the message, you would see how much the medium can influence the message itself, so much so that the message doesn't become what it actually says. It becomes something else. Now, the teachings of Marshall McLuhan sometimes contradicted with some other visionaries that I met in my life. And one of them is Hagga Adil. Now, Hagga Adil was my barber for a little while. And when I went to his shop, and during the intervals when he was trying to find something to cut in my hair, because of his eyesight, not because of me, somebody came to his shop trying to sell him something. You know, he had the guy had something like a plastic bottle with a little tap, looks very nice, with oil inside. And he asked him about the price. And the guy said, full or empty? Hagga Adil was confused. He said, okay, full and empty. It was something like, you know, 25 pounds if it's full, 20 pounds if it's empty. And Haj Adil looked at me and said, does it make sense to you? Is it really true? Full 25 pounds and empty 20. Now, of course, I had to agree with him on whatever he says because he had a very sharp razor blade in his hand. But when I thought about it, actually what he meant was something about the content of that bottle. He couldn't believe that we spend more money on the container than the content itself. And when you think about both gurus, Marshall McLuhan and Haj Adil, you probably you will see that this experience that we try to create for people who use our work is an experience about the amalgamation of the two. And of course, sometimes you can format crappy content and do something with it, but it doesn't often take you very far. So you have to really be picky and selective about the kind of content. And by the way, I hate the word. I'm not going to tell you why now, but it's a very bad word. But we work with that content and we shape it and format it and create an experience around it so that we can convey it and have an impact with it, not just get people to receive it, but just get people to internalize the message that is there. Once upon a time, and I witnessed this guy used to sell newspapers and magazines in Dahab a long time ago. If you were lucky, you would get the Newsweek that is 1 week old. International newspapers were there. Most likely he used to collect them from hotel rooms after tourists who arrived on the same day left. Things like that. And that sort of symbolizes the nature of media at the time. That was probably 20 years ago, not a long time ago. And it meant that our access to information was extremely limited. It wasn't easy to get information when we wanted, wherever we are, as we do right now. And it was dominated by the big and mighty. You cannot play with them because they are rich. If you want to say something that the masses would listen to, you have to have the means and the power to build a newspaper, a magazine, a publishing house, a radio station, a TV channel. And I can tell you, having worked in that business for quite a long time, it's not cheap. Your best bet, if you are an activist, is to print something on a typewriter. And if you're a little bit rich, you have 10 pounds or equivalent, you can use what we used to call stencil and print it and distribute the flyers and go to prison. That's the cycle. But things have changed, and that was a one-way interaction mode. You sit there, you listen to what we tell you. Professionals like us, we're working hand in hand with the big and mighty. We either work with the state or with the big guys, and we pass to the community what we believe we should be passing to them, and there are lots of red lines that we know about, orange ones that we are careful around, light red ones that we play with when we want to pretend that we are brave and courageous and do things that the owners don't want us to do, but apparently they didn't really mind. Okay. But lots of things happened, and we witnessed a number of revolutions. This is the satellite revolution. This is when people in Morocco managed to find aluminium plates that they can use to replace satellite dishes because they were expensive, and they managed to get access to lots of things that they were not accessing before. This is the era of Al Jazeera and the like, which actually started with NBC and with the BBC Arabic in 1994. And Al Jazeera popularized and spread the message in a different way and created a new concept in broadcasting that people had access to. So in terms of access, it improved a little bit. The message that you are getting now through satellite dishes is not exactly the uniform message that you used to get through the establishment. It was different. It still wasn't two-way, and it still is dominance because you don't have the means to do this. There were some opportunities where you could speak in some of these programs, but again, it's very limited. So it's a revolution, but it was not a complete one. It was limited. And then there is another one that came afterwards, and that's the fall of the wall. I was in Berlin, by the way, and I can tell you that the wall there didn't fall. It's not true. The story is different. But anyway, that one is true. The wall actually was demolished, and that wall was the threshold of entry to that game. You know, the threshold of entry was very high because you needed really to have tens and hundreds of thousands of pounds or dollars to be able to do any of what we have just described. You know, magazines, newspapers, TV channels, radio channels, anything. And you can do whatever you like, and whether people would listen to it or not, that's a different story, but you can. But this one is different because it means that if you have a couple of pounds, and you can have half an hour on any kind of a makeshift internet coffee shop like the one that we are looking at now, you can put a message and people can access it and can interact with it. There is no guarantee that you will reach the masses. It only depends on how good you are or how relevant your message is or how important people think what you say is. So there is no guarantee, but still, you can be famous, you can be rich, you can access lots of people if you do that. And the media responded in very peculiar ways to this threat and challenge. This is a real sign, by the way. And a bit confusing, might be irrelevant to see two signs pointing out to Mohammed Al-Khamis Airport. It's not exactly like, you know, all roads lead to Matar Mohammed Al-Khamis Airport. But it's something like it. Now, we saw the media reacting in very different ways to what's happening around them. There was a state of denial, and it continues up till today. It continues, and you know that it continues as soon as you see somebody on TV or in a lecture like this one or in a seminar who says something like, you know, the new media is not credible, you know, bloggers are not credible, you know, this is not really authentic information coming from a source that we can trust. And when people say something like this to me, I say to them, well, can you please tell me if the establishment has had that trust that you're talking about? Have we ever been sure about the authenticity, credibility of any information that we have been getting through the establishment, through TVs, radio channels, newspapers, magazines? I don't think it has. But that was a reaction to that new challenge and that war on the professional, because people stepped in and started filling the gap that they felt has been there for quite a long time. But there were different other ways of engaging with that new change, of that engagement with the audiences who are becoming professionals themselves, and they are changing our understanding of what content is, what the message is, and what needs to be listened to, read, or heard. And do you want to ask me a question?
No, I can't hear you.
You cannot hear me. You can't sit here. Or do you want me to come to you?
No, I can speak in the mic.
In the mic? Which mic? This one? No. You can sit here if you wanted to hear me.
Come on down here.
You are the only one in the whole group, I think, that cannot hear me. So,
If
and I think
anyone else can't hear,
he
come
cannot hear.
down.
There are lots of chairs here.
Seats. But just a second, we'll just have.
Okay. Okay, sir.
Shocked everyone. You better ask them if they can hear. They look shocked. Can you hear?
Are you all in the back listening to me? Is there anyone else who cannot hear me in the back?
Layla, can you hear from the back?
Can you? Okay.
All right. So there are a few more chairs. If you
There are lots of chairs here, and as I said, my natural voice, I think, I'm not saying it's beautiful, but I tend to think that it communicates better than through a microphone. You know, don't ask me why, because I've spent most of my life behind microphones, and I should be friends with them, but I tend to think that people sort of comprehend and listen better when I speak directly to them. So back to that experience that I had. It was back in 2003, and it was a few weeks before the war in Iraq. And for some reason, I think my department, the BBC Arabic department, wanted to get rid of me. So they sent me to the strategy department, assuming that I can do something there that I didn't understand myself. So I spent a couple of boring months with people who are thinking very intensely over the day, don't take breaks, start very early, go very late, which is not like me. And as soon as the war started, I thought, this is my savior. You know, I will go back to the Arabic service and say, guys, you know, I'm a broadcaster. Let's leave this strategy thing aside. I handed my paper and my studies, and I would like to do something here. So I went to Gaiman McClellan, my predecessor. He was the head of the BBC Arabic Radio at the time. And I said, we haven't been, you know, playing with phone-in programs that much. Why don't we do something through which we can sort of understand a little bit more how people see the war in Iraq and all the issues that are coming from it? I said, okay, let's do that. We announced the telephone numbers. Following day, I was in the studio for about an hour and a half. And I had some of my best time ever. You know, it was very interesting, very engaging, changed my views of what audiences are about, changed my views of who actually are the pundits, experts, analysts, you know, all of that stuff. And I came out from the studio excited with the experience. Met Gaiman on the door. Said, Gaiman, what do you think? You know, it was okay, wasn't it? And I said, yes, it was. Yeah, it was fine. It was fine. I said, okay, well, it's Wednesday today. Do you think we probably would do another one on Friday? I said, no, I don't think. I said, why? You said it was okay. He said, yes, it was okay. You haven't been here. You haven't seen the telephones ringing. You haven't seen all that engagement with the people who were leaving messages and talking to us. I said, okay, why don't you do it Friday then? He said, no, we are going to start from tomorrow, and we are going to do it twice a day. So we'll do 2 hours in the morning, 2 hours in the afternoon. I said, well, it's too much. And 6 days a week. So I could only negotiate that I'm going to do only one episode on Saturday so I can have 1 day and a half. And I did that for a couple of years, and it was a remarkable experience, not to listen to people who were engaging with me, but to create a dialogue and a debate between people who would never meet. You know, a Syrian in Korea and a Saudi living in the States and an Egyptian in Asyut. Unique. And as a moderator, I tended to step back and run the debate and put some kind of a frame for how people engage. But it was a revealing experience that taught me how important and how interesting and how creative and how resourceful people are. And from that, we had different genres. So we started this program, نقطة حوار. And then after a while, we had to diversify because I was running out of steam. I was getting really tired. And so we had to do one for sports, which Samir Farah used to do at the time. And we did one for sports, which Mohammed Hermasi did. And the other one, which was a little bit more social youth oriented, which Samir Farah did. And then later on, that experience developed into a cycle that combines the interaction on the web and on radio, and I started experimenting with multi-platform engagement, radio, online, TV, back in 2000 with what I believe was the first ever multi-platform program running on 3 platforms at the same time, not streaming. There were 3 teams working on one program, the Kuwait TV team, the BBC Arabic radio team, who had people in Kuwait and people in London, and the web team, who were taking video that is different than the television video, because at the time we believed that you had to create video differently for the web. Smaller screens, very narrow bandwidth, and so on and so forth. So that was one way of engaging with audiences, and that was one way of capturing the content or the discourse and turning it into something professional. And it was one way that we used